Hey, welcome back to another episode of RPG Jam Sessions. I'm your Uncle Jeff, and we're here to talk a little bit about technical difficulties. I am joined by my esteemed colleague which way do I go? This way, to my left, Mr. Brian.
How you doing, Jeff?
Brian, how you doing,
Doing good.
man? We uh, we had ourselves a little bit of an escapade last week. Got a chance to do another episode of Minds and Biscuits, and also had the opportunity to have a lot of technical difficulties as we were doing so. Um, I, uh, I really didn't understand how much. I never understood how technical difficulties could impact a game so much as that evening. For some reason, it seemed like beforehand it was okay. There was a glitch here and there. I had to reset here and there, but this last time, I was having to reset my browser. I was having to reset my computer. My computer crashed one time. I mean, there was a lot going on.
Oh yeah.
And that interfered a little bit with the game flow. I have to go
Yeah.
ahead and admit. But hey, you know what? I'll say this. You know what? You probably had a fantastic time this weekend with your Star Wars game. Probably had no technical difficulties whatsoever,
No,
right?
not a single 10 or whatever.
Oh,
Yeah, no,
okay.
it was
It
yeah,
was in single digits.
yeah, single digits. It wasn't bad, but again, we had players who we just couldn't get on for 10 minutes and finally had to just, audio only, no video,
Yeah.
and then the multiple times you cut in or out there, you froze, you got to repeat that. And, I've seen worse for sure, but
Yeah.
it still wasn't great. So, yeah, it has an impact on your games for sure.
Right. And we're struggling to champion these digital medias, right? The ability to use things like Roll20, using Fantasy Grounds, and then putting it together some kind of a combination. Like I don't know, there's like an audio only option that you can use through what is that called? It is TeamSpeak. Now they'll use
Mm.
TeamSpeak. That's an option that's there. And there's a few others that are out there that just does like an audio only. But a lot of that stuff hinges on that connection, right? It hinges on that ability to actually make contact and then actually see people or just hear them.
Yeah.
We were looking at the in the tavern, and there was a couple of posts there. One was kind of spawned a discussion in regards to what about an audio only game? Not everybody
Mhm.
is great on camera. Not everybody likes to be on camera or even has a video camera. Could we get away with doing an audio only game
Yeah.
to manage that bandwidth and hopefully mitigate some technical issues? I'm kind of ambiguous on it. We actually had for a couple of weeks in of Minds and Biscuits. We had a couple of weeks where one of the players didn't have a video camera, and I thought, it worked fine. It
Yeah.
was okay. He probably had the least amount of issues with Roll20 than any of us.
Yeah. Absolutely. And same player is in my Star Wars game and played
Okay.
the first 2 or 3 sessions with no webcam, and it seemed to be okay. And
Yeah.
yeah, some of those points, and it was actually, Brent brought those up. It was over in the Mad Clerics
Oh, that's right. That's
as
right. It was
well.
in the Mad Clerics.
So
Check out the Mad Clerics blog.
shout out to the Mad Cleric.
Yeah.
Good discussion going on. Just Mad Cleric actually right now has a series of blog posts he's written about the pros and the cons of the online gaming medium.
Right.
And brings up a lot of good points, that there are definite benefits, and then there are limitations and some drawbacks, things you have to overcome.
Right.
But I thought it was really interesting bringing up that idea of just what if we just leaned into the audio only,
Yeah.
and how that might change how you go about things. And honestly, we'd probably have a whole lot less hiccups, at least in the game, though. You sure do lose that, as a bit of the body language. It's you don't get much body language out of the
I know
little
we only
text.
have these like little boxes that we have to deal
So
with, but
yeah, you got to
you
do
know,
the abbreviated marionette style body language, but there is a bit of that still that still comes across in the
right.
video, and being able to see that it's interesting. And I find I'm still, especially as a new GM trying to play these things out, it's interesting sometimes. I don't know if it's a plus or a minus sometimes with the video of trying to read the players and how in tune they are or they're not. There's a certain video. It's like the 1,000-yard stare, so to speak.
Right.
And it's actually I'm reading something else on the screen look.
Yeah.
Right.
So like if I'm doing this, you could totally tell I'm not paying
exactly.
attention.
Yeah,
Right?
and it's like,
yeah.
and you're like, are they not paying attention? Maybe they're looking at the map in roll 20.
Yeah, looking
and I
up
can
rules.
tell
They're
Yeah,
whatever.
they're looking up. Yeah, they're in Star Wars, they're Wikipedian or they're Sorcery, SRDN, whatever.
What exactly is a Toydarian? Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
and and so I'm like, are they paying attention or are they not paying attention? And I can't. Sometimes you can't actually tell.
Right.
Are they or aren't they engaged? But we're adults, so it's in some ways it's their responsibility to be engaged themselves.
Yeah.
But what I actually found interesting was I had a player then whose video wasn't on, and I was probably more actively aware that they weren't speaking.
That's true, because that's your only point of contact. That's it.
It was my only point of contact, and there was some encounters, and it was based more on one of the other characters a little more actively, was sort of on the mission. But I became actually kind of acutely aware that, wow, I've got nothing from them. They haven't said anything,
Right.
and so it kind of helped me to then purposely say, and so what would your character do? What are they thinking? How are they doing that? So there's some really interesting things to consider, especially I think as you're a new GM. I think the temptation is to go for the flash, right?
Sure.
Roll 20 in fantasy grounds. Oh man, I can make all these maps and spend all this time, and then you spend an hour just trying to get people connected, and you would have been
Can you
better.
see any of this stuff?
It probably would have been a better game. I can think of a few in the short time that I've been playing online that the games probably would have been better if we'd have just all been on Skype, just talking, just completely imagining it. Not to say that the Roll20 isn't great, because when it is working and it's great,
it's off the hook. It's perfect. It's just
great.
fantastic.
The ambient music, the cutscenes,
right.
Then you drop in for a combat encounter. You can move your tokens around, and it's great. But more, we were talking more and more that seems to be struggling. And so, I told my guys after the session, I went, I was like, man, I think if I was gonna if I'm gonna run a Star Wars session again, and this is where you got to, as a GM, think about your system.
Yeah.
What is your game? If you're running a game of, 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons, you better have, a map with tokens.
Yeah, it's a requirement. You're not going to get away with that. Yeah.
You must, you have to. But in Star Wars, these Fantasy Flight games are very much supposed to be thematic and cinematic, and not really played with maps at all. It's these range bands, and they sort of actually encourage you to keep it fast, keep it moving, and abstract more than anything. So I'm, sort of leaning into that, going, well, maybe I should just find a good video chat client, Skype or Hangouts or Facebook messages, or just find whatever the 4 or 5 of us can we all connect and get that on the baseline, and then let's just imagine it, and I can screen share. I mean, there's so many different hacks you could do.
Sure.
we all share a Google Drive, and make sure open up that picture I put in the drive.
Yeah,
Like
you can actually see people maneuvering around in the document and that sort of thing for sure.
yeah, yeah. Like you could quite easily build a map in Google Slides
Yep.
with the little tokens that people could move them around and everyone would be able to see it. You lose some of that magic line of sight, lose the dice rolls,
And that's the
and
Flash,
honestly,
though. That's the
that's the
Flash,
Flash.
right?
Yeah,
And
it's not a
they draw
substitute.
you in with that. I've been I got really into it when we were doing our Victoriana campaign. And, kind of speaking from the perspective of a new GM, I was learning that system, but at the same time, I was also learning the line of sight stuff,
Mhm.
the elements that you can add in,
Yeah,
lighting, that sort of
dynamic
thing.
lighting.
Yeah, the dynamic lighting. And so I was kind of monkeying with that here and there, and you can actually see it in the videos that are actually released that I struggled with that. There were some times when the player would say, you know what, I'm seeing nothing. I've got nothing, and I'm like, okay, I got to go and monkey around and fix this and do all this. And if it's for a game like you said, for a 4E or for Dark Heresy or for your more Pathfinder,
Yep.
the more concentrated games where tactics are an absolute necessity, then yeah,
Hmm.
I think using something like this would be fine. I found that in the game four of Mine and Biscuits, the one thing is that they already have. I'm working off of the lands of, or the mines of Fandelver, so it's already been pre-made for me. Line of sight's
Yep.
all taken care of. Dynamic lighting's all taken care of. All that's there. So I didn't have to do any of that prep. I just have to learn how to interact with it properly. So, but on the flip side of that, I'm finding myself more and more just using the character sheet elements because it's real handy to be able to just click your strength save, or let's go ahead and click stealth, and it just rolls the dice for you. It's got a pretty decent dice roller. Um, the that was where I was kind of steering myself towards when we were the last session, is that I didn't have as much need for the map. We got into a battle, and I went and
Mhm.
I grabbed a forest map that I have, I slapped it down there, threw your tokens on there, and then I just turned off the lights and said, okay, here's what you can see. If you've got a torch, here, I'll flip that on, and then we're done. I wasn't
Yep.
doing any of the shading, I wasn't doing any of the line of sight. It was just what could you see? And so it
Mhm.
made it a little bit easier from my side, and it wasn't as necessary because I could have done, like you said, I could have done that all narratively. I didn't really need to have that. I mean, it may have been kind of fun, but to be honest, all it did was take up bandwidth, caused my computer to crash a couple of more times during the session. So that was fun. Um, so yeah, and then I went into Friday night and playing in a game with Mike Perna and realizing that he doesn't have any maps. He has one map that's on the background, and that's all we're working with. And in fact, I'm not even displaying that to the recording. It's just our talking heads
Mm.
going back and forth. So I think, and again, bringing that to the point of being a new GM, the knowing your skill level, knowing your technology, and knowing the limitations of that is great for yourself. But then you have to add in the dynamic of your fellow players. What do they have available? Do they have a camera? Do they have a microphone? More often than not, a laptop's going to have an integral mic. You can just plug in your headset, and most often that'll pick up the mic. But the camera gets into the hairy scary. It's like, okay, well, number one, I'm going to be on display. I think it was Brent that brought up this point, is that some people aren't always that comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So you, as a GM, you need to be prepared for that. That you may have a mix of players that have video and don't. Um, I would say if you're going all digital, have the option of being just audio. Have that out there for
Mhm.
the players, that if they decide that they don't feel comfortable with the video aspect, hey, you know what? You can be
Yeah.
audio only. And if the rest of us want to do that, totally fine. If you want to just look at my gruesome mug, no problem. We can do that too.
Yeah.
And that cuts down on bandwidth, cuts down on potential technical glitches. And then the alternative is, like you said, just going full theater of the mind, not worrying about the tech in Roll20 or your Fantasy Grounds or any other medium. All you're doing is you've got your printed character sheet, you're ready to go, and then you have something like Skype, you have something like Google Hangouts. I know they're going more of a corporate tilt to it, to where it's just the video. They're taking away a lot of the apps and the dice rollers, so you have to go with the
Yeah.
old-fashioned dice. Oh my gosh, what a concept!
Which, honestly, some people that's a drawback for the online is they're like, well, I want to roll the dice.
Yeah, for
So
sure,
it's
for
actually
sure.
can be a boon in some ways.
I've gotten to the point where I actually kind of it's fun to see the dice result for everybody because we can't all be in the same place, so we can actually see it. So I think maybe an alternative to that, if you can't get a dice roller, is to have a central dice cam. Like if
I
you
was
want to,
just gonna say that. I
if you
was
don't
like,
want to have your own face, then maybe I could have a central dice cam and we can just roll dice that way. I don't know.
yeah,
There's so
you
many
just
things.
there's that element where it's nice to throw the dice, but if I
Sure.
think if you had a dice cam, if you could do a dice tower with a
Right.
cam on the ending and say, I'm dropping these in and everybody sees them rattle out the bottom, like
Yeah.
that could be super, super cool.
Build some intense,
Um,
build
and
some tension there. Yeah,
yeah,
for
that
sure.
could be pretty sweet.
For sure.
So yeah, there's some really cool alternatives, and in a lot of things, it's I think from the if you're a new GM, the temptation is to take the flash, these tools, and they become a crutch, right? Like that if I've
Yeah.
got all these pictures, I got all this stuff, that'll make it somehow better. And you spend your time going, well, let me just a second, let me find, and that's not enjoyable. It would be, more enjoyable for you to have described it in good detail.
Right.
So a good picture can be really nice sometimes. Like, boom, here's a jungle picture. You're trekking
Right.
through this jungle, and like a couple of pictures here and there are great, but in a lot of ways, the maps can really become almost a hindrance in many ways.
Yeah.
I was noticing as a play, speaking of our Minds and Biscuits that we were playing, we dropped into Fandelver, and I'm sitting there, and you can't not go, oh, let me see what all the buildings in town are.
Scroll around this map, that
Yeah,
kind of
I'm
thing.
gonna
Let's see what's going
scroll
on.
around, and now all of a sudden, I'm forced to deal with having knowledge that my player wouldn't have.
Right.
And it's that temptation to metagame a little too much, or
Good point.
and so like that can actually be a little bit hard. And there's probably it was technology, but there was a good reason that piece of vinyl and whiteboard marker were such good tools for 30 years of D&D. You're in a room, it's about this big, okay, and okay, now I have some scale, and just
Yeah.
working with those. And I think that's what's cool about at least some of the newer, more abstracted systems. Like what I really like about the Star Wars is range bands. I tell you you're in medium range, you go, okay, well, it gives you, I'm approximately 40 feet away from the guy.
Right.
It's going to take me a little while to get there. That's all I need to know. I don't need to know I'm I can only go 5 squares. It sort of takes away that nitpicky, I'm 1 step away from being undercover.
I can almost make it. And you know what? Those are the times when you start yelling at your GM.
Yeah.
Remember this, kids. When you're a GM and you're gonna start getting into a game that's really nitpicky, be prepared for potential real life combat, because then they start saying, "But if I just toss this over here and then I could jump over that, I mean, come on, why do I have to roll for this?" So it's that's when the nitty gritty, detail oriented maps and stuff like that can sometimes be your downfall.
Yeah, be the downfall. So I think and that's an interesting. One of the other things we said we were going to kind of talk about was, what do you do with crazy stuff that happens? Where I was telling Jeff earlier about my players in the Star Wars game home brewing essentially a nuclear bomb, mini nuclear device with speeder bike cores, and they were going to set a timer and try to disable a shuttle with it. And so cinematically, I'm saying, sure, that can work if he can sneak up. He does a hard check to rig the bomb, and this Jawa can probably cause it to do something, and then can you sneak up and get it in the right place? And I'm thinking, that fits within the rules. But then everything goes wrong, and eventually a rocket launcher gets fired at the 2 guys, storm troopers holding the bomb, trying to disable it. What do you do?
Oh,
There's no rule
there's
for,
nothing.
nuclear devices hit by
No,
missile rocket launchers, and does it go off or doesn't it?
right.
What do you do? And you know, I think it goes back again to this. I think it sort of dovetails with this technology discussion. It's, you got to think about what kind of game are you playing?
Yeah.
What is the game you're trying to play? Not what system you're playing and what are the rules, but what kind of game are you going for? Are you going for an over the top action film? Are you
Yeah.
going for a gritty, realistic, whatever? And so
Yeah.
for me, it was, this is Star Wars, and Luke shoots the rocket that magically does a dive down the thing and blows up the entire Death Star.
Right.
Like they did crazy stuff. Uh, and so I'm like, this is Star Wars. It's supposed to be fun.
Why not?
Yeah, you hit the nuclear bomb and it goes off right as you shoot the missile and jump off the
You jumping
cliff.
off the, yeah, yeah, yeah. You got to
He
have the
jumps
slow
out,
motion action
literally
shot.
jumps off the cliff, fall and lets go and falls off the cliff, and the bomb goes off and
Sure.
misses you, and you know, and it was, why not? Because now that's the game where they set off the nuclear device and,
Right.
and blew up the ship. Like, that's a way better story than, yeah, we tried to build a nuclear bomb, but we failed miserably because that's not reasonable. So, like, as a GM, I think you really do have to think about those things
Yeah.
beforehand. And
Well, I'm actually, as you're typing, as you're saying this, I'm writing a few notes and displaying it to the viewers here. Which would have been nice to have the Google Drive share document, which we'll talk about in a second here,
yeah,
as an alternative. But what are you setting yourself up for in the game, right? If you do go with this technology, right? If you're going to go with the potential of having glitches here and there, and you're like, okay, I've fought my way through it, I've got myself set up, you're setting, what precedent are you setting when you display these things? If you're going whole hog and it's like, here's the map, here's the grid, here's the dynamic lighting, here's the, you can only look at this section of the map, and I'm going to have a picture for every single situation. Now it's like you come up with a scenario like this where there's a nuke, and you have to put together all these things, and some player may ask, hey, can I see what that looks like? Let me hang on 1 second. Don't look at me. Don't look at me.
yeah,
So, what are you setting yourself for in the game?
yeah,
Establish not so much boundaries, but just establish expectations with the technology that, hey, we're going to use. Let's say, we're going to use Roll20, and through experimentation and through experience, I've found that sometimes Roll20 can be glitchy. And as much as I love it, and I love the centralization of everything from the character sheets to the ability to do a map, to the ability to do dynamic lighting, and then also the ability to have the audio visual in one stop shop. Lately, the last few months, unfortunately, it's been a little perturbed, a little
yeah,
agitated. So it's caused me to explore alternatives, and like you were talking about, having just the full-on narrative, going full abstract. And so, in those cases where there are nukes, you're fine. You can play it out. You can have a fantastic game like Star Wars, or anything powered by the apocalypse, or feng shui. I mean, all of those
yeah.
games
All the
can.
fate, yeah,
Fate, of course, perfect example. I mean, these are the things that would fit into this type of scenario perfectly. So, it sends you into that realm of looking for alternatives. Do you look for combinations? Do you do just audio only? Do you, like, as I mentioned, combinations? We were talking before the recording started about a combination of maybe something like Skype or Zoom or Google Hangouts as our way to connect video, audio, video, where there's a lot more dependability. I think
mhm,
we recorded on Roll20 our first episode or two, I think,
yep,
and you can see the quality. It's decent. It's okay. Not the best. We didn't have any issues. But then the following week we were gaming and we had issues, and I'm thinking, man, this isn't very dependable. So we went and we picked up Zoom. There's a free version where you can have two people on the camera for however long you want, and then there's a limit of 40 minutes for multiple people. So an option for a clear and clean audiovisual experience, it might be. something
Yeah.
like a Zoom or a Google Hangouts. And then in concert with that, you could have a flat map of Roll20. You could use Google Drive where you're setting up spreadsheets or not spreadsheets, but PowerPoint presentations, like you said, being able to maneuver things around, having a shared document where you're taking notes. All the players have access to it, and they can, here's some loot.
Here's all your player sheets. Yeah, here's the
Yeah, exactly.
loot. Yeah,
So I mean, there's alternatives there for being able to connect that doesn't involve having subscriptions or having, fancy audio visual equipment, that sort of thing. So it's find out what your players want. You've gone to this step as a new GM. You've gotten to this step where you've got a local game group that you work with, so you're live and everything's perfect. That's fantastic. But then there's going to be situations where your friends move away. You connect with people online. I mean, that's how I met you. Is I
yep.
I met you online, and so you're going to have to go that digital route. So, what are your expectations with setting this up? Establish those for your players. Make sure that they understand that if we do run into technical difficulties, here's my backup plan. And that's the next point, is have a backup plan.
Yeah.
If you need to trim down the bandwidth, and some folks don't have the internet protocols to survive, then go audio only. I think was it you or was it Brent that mentioned that in one of their game groups they have somebody that's in China,
That was
and
Brent.
they don't have the bandwidth for whatever region they're in, and so they're doing audio only, and it's worked out well. So be willing. Gosh, when I start this Roll20 stuff, and I looked at Fantasy Grounds, and I've been enjoying both. You see all the bells and whistles, right? The flash, like you said, all the flash is just so beautiful, and you're thinking, man, I could do this, I could do that, I could set up all these wonderful things, and then you just get carried away.
Yeah.
You can easily get carried away. So I would say my advice is, like I said, set expectations for yourself and your players. Have a backup plan, and be reasonable. Look at the type of game you're in. Like you mentioned, Fantasy Flight, Star Wars, and all of these narrative-driven games. You don't have to have too many bells and whistles. It's fun.
Yeah.
Have an alternative for it. Have that option for, like, hey, I found this awesome picture of the Millennium Falcon, and it looks just like our ship. Boom! There's the picture. Yay! We can all enjoy it. But if that's not going to be the everyday expectation, make sure that's known.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
So, go ahead.
I was just gonna piggyback. I was just gonna mention one thing. You had mentioned like that having your expectations. You described the scene of you've got all this stuff laid out in Roll20. The danger is not just that the players are going to expect that it's always going to be flashy. You are going to expect that they go where you've planned. You described a rail, like the perfect railroad scenario.
I will railroad you into the thing that I made.
I've made all these things. You must go to these things, And it's like I was like, oh my goodness, didn't even think of that. Like how I might be railroading them by having built this map that I'm like, well, you have to go to the map, and boy, that's a big one too. That again, if you're doing a dungeon crawl, of course you're railroading them. You got to get through the dungeon, and that's that's fine. So yeah, that tactical versus other it's a pretty big one to consider. What do you want?
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. Well, brief. I mean, any other cool things that you experienced with your game this weekend? I mean, you had the nuke incident. You had that, the unplanned nuclear activity.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was good to get back playing again. We had been on quite a long hiatus, and to see them get in and get some action, and finally get to the point where they're in the game system. Their duty actually kicked in, sabotage for two of them, and combat superiority. Seeing them actually getting to mix it up a little bit and take down some of the Imperial troopers, and with some sneaky grenades in pockets and shooting from the hip and taking some guys out. It was just good fun to get to play with those guys and sort of keep it For me, the challenge was I was trying to keep it narrative because I knew I was at
Right.
the end where we were now at the map. So I went in going, we're at the map, but make sure you describe the room when they walk into it, not
Right.
just you see a top-down view to this is
Nice.
the size that you get to, try to describe it cinematically and
You're not letting the map actually set your dimensions too hardcore. It's like, you know what? We went into this cinematic. Just because we're looking at a map doesn't mean we're not going to continue being
yeah,
cinematic. So,
yeah,
okay,
yeah. Like,
that's cool.
can I make it? Yeah, you can make it there. Of course you can. How far am I? Or but using it for just some nice things like, oh, you're probably line of sight, cover.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm hiding behind these things. You probably get a boost to your cover or whatever it might be. So,
for sure. Yeah.
no, it was great to play with those guys. Looking forward to finishing up hopefully on Sunday. I'm gonna do everything I can to um, help them finish and get it over with. We'll be um, just so trying to tweak that so that we can kind of fill it out. I have a feeling I have far more challenges than they need, which is good.
Sure.
So we
That's
can
good. Having more in
just
your tool belt and
more
be
than I
ready.
need, which is great. So
Good.
and then starting to like we said, some of these tech things are actually making me as a new GM rethink how I want to GM online and
Yeah.
looking at some, especially like we talked in the past episodes about more of a sandbox style, which meshes nicely with a very narrative
Oh,
system and
delightful.
see where we go. So
Yeah. All right. Well, you know what? It's good to always talk with you. It's good to hear your experience
yeah,
and to find out, what's been a big part of this learning process for you. It's interesting to see with GMs coming up now. Not that you're a youngster, but the idea that you're starting your GM experience with all of these avenues of opportunity available to you, not just the
yeah,
hundreds of games that are out there, but also the mediums, the vast numbers of
mhm,
mediums that are out there. So
yeah,
it's a good time. It's a good time. It's becoming more and more popular, and I think a lot of it is owed to this type of medium, this video and audio medium. So I'm really glad
yeah,
that's happening. So it's all right. Well, you know what, guys? Thanks so much for stopping by.
absolutely.
We're really happy to have these sessions to talk about gaming and to enhance that new GM experience. If you have any questions or anything that you'd like to have us talk about, or if you want to see something different on the episodes, let us know. Message
Yeah,
me at GSPKHEEGAN on Twitter, or stop by the tavern in Facebook, and you'll be able to send me a message, find out what's going on, questions, comments, that sort of thing. We always want to look for ways to improve the show. So, once again, thanks so much, Brian. Thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate it. And we will see you guys on the flip side on our next episode.